All right, welcome back. We are COMP397 in the winter 2021 semester, and it's week 8, part 2 of our broadcast. And now we're talking about an intro to mobile development. And the first part, we kind of talked about the structure, where we are from the admin perspective of this course. And then the second part, we're going to be talking about mobile development and what's different between mobile development and WebGL, which you've been doing a lot differently. So there's going to be a couple pieces for this lab. So lab 8, which I'm going to produce in a second for you. One part is, please, if you haven't had a chance to do that, please go and download LDPlayer from LDPlayer.net. Let's show you what that looks like, because we need some kind of way of running our game and emulating it, because many people don't have an Android device or even something that's capable of playing a game. All right, so please go to LDPlayer.net and install LDPlayer. And we'll talk about configuration for that in a bit. So please go grab that. I'm going to put the link for that inside of the lab portion of today. So under today's videos, which is week 8, there are going to be a section for the lecture. And I'm just going to make a new link for that. This is download LDPlayer. Okay. On that, for lab 8, okay, let's talk about lab 8 for a second. I want to talk about this for a second. So lab number 8, right? Lab 7, I haven't marked yet, but lab 8 coming out. It's going to be due, again, it's going to have a due date. It's going to be individual. And it's going to be due this Saturday at midnight. So please make sure you get that done. Okay, so that's when it's going to be due. And for lab 8, we need to make mobile function. All right, so that's something that we need to make. Mobile touch is one of those things that we want you guys to make work. All right, so that is lab 8. Again, this is worth 1% of your final grade or so. I think it's worth like 1%. And it's going to be due, again, week 8. Week 8, that's Saturday, March, and what would that be again? This week, March 13th. March 13th, 2021 at midnight. And remember, the instructions for this is you need 2 screenshots, right, for what I'm asking you to do. So instructions as per other labs in the series. All right, that's what we're doing. And submission requirements are the same. Okay, so there's nothing different here than what we've done in the past. From a restrictions perspective, again, you're ready to and good to go. It's going to be due again Saturday. So make sure you get done by Saturday, please, to get your marks. Okay, so that's what's coming up. On that, also, I've extended you guys so that if you notice, assignment 1 part 3 is due tonight at midnight. Some people have asked for additional time because of midterms and so on. So please make sure you get your lab or your assignment 1 part 3 done tonight. All right, so let's start off with configuration. I'm going to bring up, for a starter, I'm going to bring up the previous project we were working on before. So if we look up online and if we look at GitHub, and if we look at the last project we did together, which is this one, 7A, that is going to be your starter for this project here. So 7A. And we'll talk about scriptable objects and stuff like that as well today, a little bit, if we have time later on. Okay, so that's going to be your starter. So on your under your GitHub repo for week 8, this is going to be your lab 8 starter. We kind of go with the previous one, and I give you the completed version. So it is lab 8 starter. Labs are pretty simple, guys. All you have to do is like literally follow along and you get marks for attending. So I think that's pretty straightforward. But if you don't follow along, then that's bad. This is an important lab because it'll tell you how things are going to work. So let me download this one just like as if you would. So I'm going to download the code. So download zip archive. And when it comes up, what I want to do here is I want to pull it across to my desktop, just like normal. So here is my desktop, and it's going to still download. You can see Lab 7 was quite large, 7A. There's lots of little details in it. Right now we're kind of scoping over 100 megs. This is why I'm not asking you just to submit your entire archive up online a lot of times. I just want you to grab the zip archive. Please make sure you zip it. And the other thing that I've also asked is I prefer GitHub right over a zip archive if possible. Because look, this is 229 meg, even compressed, and it's going to go up in a second. We're going to talk about how that's going to change, right? So I'm just going to unzip that here. And when I unzip this, I'm going to call this, first of all, let's make sure there's no other internal folder that is blocking. So I'm just going to make this into lesson 8A. Here's lesson 8A. Couple changes that I have to make before I put it up on GitHub is I need to change the README file. That's wrong. So I'm just going to kind of put it into an editor like VS Code to change it up for now. So I'm going to say lesson 8A. Yeah, this is 8, so I'll save that. So it kind of goes up in the proper way right away. And then this will be my lesson 8A. So I need to start this off. So locally, I'm going to use, again, command prompt. So here's my command prompt. And I'm going to kind of cd or change directory into this lesson here. I've shown you this a bunch of times now. Again, you can use any tool you want, even git kraken, git init, git add dot, git commit -m. You see we have a lot of what really brought this project up higher is the animations, as you notice, right? Git commit -m, and we'll say initial commit, and then git push. We don't have a repository online. Let's make one before we do a git push. So I'm just going to make a new repository. Let's do that together. And just like we've done in the past, this is all kind of repetition, right? COMP397 in the winter 2021 semester, and it is lesson 8A. Okay, lesson 8A. So now that we have a container for our repository, our Git repository, I'm going to grab these last 3 lines of code. And just like we've done in the past, I'm going to go here to our command prompt and right-click, which copies everything in. And then I'm just going to push everything up online. And now you'll have, this is what I'm going to be working on the entire time today and onwards. So lesson 8 is an important lesson, as I said, because of a couple things. One, we're going to be using it as our mobile kind of lesson. Notice that it says, hey, you know, maybe you want to use large file support here. And it says that because there are some files, for example, my audio soundtrack, like we mentioned last time, is 70 megabytes. It's quite large. You got to be cognizant of this. And I just downloaded a random soundtrack to make this work, right? We may want to change this up later. All right, so now that we've got our projects, which is lesson 8A, let's launch Unity and start configuring and everything else to make it work. So again, I'm going to add the new project, which is on my desktop, and it's under COMP397 and lesson 8A, and select my folder. That's going to make it come here, and I'm going to launch it from here. Let's talk about LDPlayer while that's launching. So LDPlayer, mine looks like this. And if yours doesn't look like this, if it looks configured differently, I'm going to get you guys to configure yours to look like this too. A couple things that we have to notice is this. My LDPlayer is in portrait mode, right? I think for the most part, we're going to be playing in landscape mode, right? So that it's going to come up when we come to it at some point. Very clear, very closely. If you notice, there's this little settings button on the top right corner of your LDPlayer, whether it's set up like this or otherwise. Let's go to that button, please. And I want to talk about the resolution that I want you to make. Notice that my resolution right now is 1440 on the x-axis by 3040 on the y-axis. This makes the y very large, right? And this is my advanced. You can, by the way, you can choose defaults, tablets, and mobile, right? So I'm going to come back to this in a second. If I choose a tablet device, it gives you some standards. So for example, 1280 wide by 720 high at 240 DPI, right? It's not bad. There might be other variations on your tablet as well. Mobile devices actually give you other kinds of phones and so on. And then when we customize, notice my customization is 3040 by 1440. I'm going to swap this around. My DPI is 480. I'm just going to make it so it's 3040 by 1440. So 3040 by 1440. So we're going to use, by default, a landscape orientation for this course, right? CPU, I'm putting at 4 cores. I recommend 4 cores if you have them, right? Again, you may want to choose whatever you want, but what we're creating is an emulator for your Android device. I'm also allowing 4 gigabytes of memory. I'm allocating to the device. We're making a VM, a virtual device, or a virtual machine that we're using. So this is something that we're going to create. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm going to click Save here. And it says Restart Now because I need to change my, I've made some changes. Now you can see my LDPlayer is wide rather than tall. If your LDPlayer was different before, you're going to see that this is something the way it's working. So it's kind of looking like this now. All right. Let's also do the next one. So, and I've got a bunch of these labs from other projects. You can always clean up your LDPlayer just like you would a mobile device by holding and dragging into the so one day when we're going to do this together, you're going to, if you want to ever create something that you want to get rid of, like I have some stuff I want to get rid of here, I'm just going to grab tools that I have. This is how you would work with it. It looks like an Android device, but a specialized form just for games. Okay, so that's what we're making. Again, I've got some extra garbage here that I'm just going to get rid of as we start over. And one more. Awesome. Notice that there are a lot of games you can try out already in your LDPlayer. There's a bunch of games here that you can see that have been kind of installed for you, right? You can also look at groups like system apps like normally, as well as go to your LD store to grab other apps. Okay, and they have some apps that come up. Your apps are going to come up here as well. Okay, let's continue to configure. Again, we're only configuring LDPlayer at this point. Model, let's go to model. Notice where it says my Samsung, I've got my Samsung G975N, all right? Please configure your model so it says the same. Samsung G975N, and you can see that you can certainly select other models here if you have a Samsung device. We're not going to build for tablet, we're building for a phone. Okay, so that's why I'm choosing this one. Frame rate. I'm going to attach a high frame rate of 90 frames per second. Okay, so as high frame rate as possible. I don't want to go to 120 frames because most models can't support this, but 90 frames is good. Up to. Okay, that's the settings you have to do for your second screen. So again, first screen, if you look, by the way, you can change the randomness of your IMEI. This is your device signature, if you will. So it tells the Unity what kind of device this is that we're emulating. So again, advanced, we did this part, right? We talked about this. Model, we talked about this. Now we're getting into game settings. Rate setup, I'm choosing 60 frames per second as the default. That's normal. Support for ASTC texture, higher definition. And then we've left this on in PUBG, blah, blah. We don't care about PUBG Mobile, but we're leaving this as is, the way it is right now. So this is screen number 2, or screen number 3. Okay. We're going to go to the next one, audio. Audio is primary sound capture driver and primary sound driver. Network. We're not going to change anything here for network. Network bridging is disabled. Shortcuts, same shortcuts. Wallpaper, you can choose a wallpaper you like. Other settings. Okay, now things that we need for you to put on. Okay, so automatically rotate screen, enable. Lock landscape, disable. I don't want you to lock anything here because if I want to change the orientation, you can. Tab mode, enable. Root permission, disable. Okay, here's an important one. ADB debug. Please make sure that it is an open connection. Okay? ADB debug. Has to be open. Exit options. Pop-up prompt. Leave it like that. Don't exit directly. And language is English. Okay, now that you've got all these things set up, this is the setup for your LDPlayer. LDPlayer, again, is your virtual device so that everything works on mobile. Okay, because we don't have a real mobile device. This is what we're doing. Questions around anything here from the people that are here. This is your setup for your mobile device. Anybody? All right, no questions. None from YouTube as well. I'm going to click save. And now I have my mobile setup. This is the first piece. The first piece is setting up your mobile device. Next, I'm going to leave this on. And I'm going to skip over back to Unity. Unity, we had some installations. If you remember, when we installed Unity, I said for you guys to install 2020.2.1F1 and do not go higher. Notice that I have an installation for Android and iOS plus others. I asked you guys to download Android before. I'm going to ask you to review your changes right now. What you should have in your Unity installation is both Android build support enabled and installed, as well as Android SDK and NDK tools, 3 gigabytes, as well as your OpenJDK, which is your Java. All right, that's how it's going to work. Android support. I do not need you to have iOS build support, as most of you do not have iOS devices, and I will not be talking about how to build for iOS in this course. But these 3 are required. Please make sure you have them. And if you don't have them, please make sure you set them up because you need them for your assignments coming forward, as well as for every lab. Okay, your labs cannot run anymore. I will not accept labs that are run in the editor anymore. They have to run inside your emulator at this point. Okay, in your emulator. So I want you guys to get used to using your emulator, and this is one of the parts of this lab. If you're not running in the emulator, if you didn't make it work, then I'm not gonna accept your lab. It's not gonna be something that is complete. So please make sure you download your Android build support if you haven't done it already, and LDPlayer as it's required. Okay, going back to the project now. So now that I have our Unity project, let's go back up to scenes, and I'm gonna go to main, where we had our main scene. It asked me to import TMP essentials, and I'm gonna do that here. Okay, how does this scene change stuff? This scene kind of was our little example scene, and it may be something that we don't want to use right now at this point, right? But we'll get into it in a sec. Okay, so first things first. So in order for us to configure, by the way, from a steps perspective, we've already done this part, so let's cross this off. You should already have your LDPlayer downloaded and installed, right? We also wanted to configure LDPlayer. We've done a little bit of this, and we're going to just configure Unity first before we get to this part. Okay, so let's do Unity configuration first. Next, I want you to go to Window. We need to go to Package Manager. Under the Package Manager, when it comes up, it triggers, right? There's going to be this little gear icon on the right here. Please click the gear icon and go to Advanced Project Settings. Under Advanced Project Settings, what we want to do is we want to enable preview packages. It says I understand. And I also want you to show dependencies, please. So enable preview packages and show dependencies. These are required for this going forward. Okay, close this up. So again, the way I did it, I went to my package manager, which is under Window, Package Manager. When it came up, I went to the gear icon. From the gear icon, I went to Advanced Project Settings, and I went to Enable Preview Packages, and I checked this on. Awesome. That's fantastic. Great. Now, we have a couple of things here that notice that there's little up arrows here. And as of this recording, it's asking me to do things like download or update these things here. I'm not going to do that at this time, but for you, you may want to choose to do them. Okay. I need to go to, from a project's perspective, I want to go to the Unity registry. All right. So don't just stay here in project. This is the stuff that's been enabled in your project, but go to instead in the little pull down to Unity registry. Unity registry. Okay. If I scroll down, right, there's going to be a bunch of new things. Notice that these are all previews. Preview, 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 netcode, UI builder, right, terrain tools, ProGrids, mock HD, memory profiler, you know, all these things, right, that have come up. And there is something called a device simulator that I want you to grab. So click on the device simulator, right here, and click on install. Okay, click on install. And what this is going to do is install my device simulator in Unity. So we had LDPlayer. This was outside of Unity. And now in Unity, we've installed this package, which is the device simulator package. All right, that's it for now. Question for you is, are you with me? Check mark if you're with me for the people that are here. X if you're not with me somehow, if it didn't work. Liam's saying it's not with me. Liam, is there a problem why you're not with me? Kautuk, you're with me? But Liam's not. Why, Liam? What's the problem? Eric's with me. I got a couple people here. My internet is not working. I'm not going to repeat exactly what you said, Liam. Okay, I'm sorry about that. But hopefully you'll be able to catch up later. All right, thank you guys to the people that answered. Hopefully you guys, the rest of you, can catch up, the people who haven't responded. Okay, so now that you've downloaded the package, in game, where it says you can go to game, there's going to be a new pull down under game. It's going to be simulator. So again, under game, so there's two. The scene, we've been working in the scene view, which is our developer view, right? Game, which is a preview of what the game is going to look like. I want to go to game and select simulator. It's going to start looking like this pad, right? We don't want this to be this. We're not making tablet games. We're making a device that's going to work with us. I want to change this. And you can see that there's options here from Apple device. And we can scroll down until we get to a Samsung Galaxy 10 Plus. This one, Samsung Galaxy 10 Plus. Please click that one. Now notice it's 1440 by 3040. Okay, I want to change these values just like we did with LDPlayer. Remember in LDPlayer we said that by default it's going to be 3040 by 1440. Okay, so that means that we want to do the same thing here. 3040 by 1440. I'm hard coding it here like so and click set. Notice it is a different setup and it's differently set up altogether. We need to rotate the device. If I rotate the device, it looks like this. And we see we have a problem with a couple of things here we have to fix. A couple of things we can do. Let me go back to this. If we rotate this way, and if we turn on the safe area, and let's go back to the other way of doing things. Let's go back to 3040 by 1440, just for a second, just to show you that. That is where we want to be. We want to be like this. So the way it was before, 3040 by 1440 with this rotation right here. Notice that we need to make some adjustments. We have this green area. In this green area is the safe area. Anything outside of the green area is not going to be viewable. Why? You're probably going to have a cutout. Most phones nowadays have some kind of cutout, a camera, something that comes up over here. For an iOS device, it's the same. Example, let's move from the Samsung Galaxy S10 to an iPhone. An example would be an iPhone 11 or 12. Let's say an iPhone 11 Pro, right? So that is not an iPad. It's an iPad Pro 11. I meant an iPhone 11. Notice that there is a safe area with a bit of a cutout there on the left-hand side. That's what the iPhone would look like. So whether it's an iPhone or an Android device, and if I go back to that Samsung Galaxy 10 Plus, which I'm going to be using for this example, there is a bit of a cutout. This area here is considered the safe area. So what we need to do is we have to ensure that our interface is adjusted for this. The other thing is that now we have a different scenario. When I run this thing locally, I want to do something that looks like this. I'm going to put in my simulator on the bottom of my screen. So I'm going to adjust my setup a little bit. I'm going to put my simulator on the bottom, and I want to put my scene at the top. So here's my scene at the top, and this is what my simulator is going to look like at the bottom. By the way, do you guys know the difference between a simulator and an emulator? This is actually a common mobile question. I had it today, actually. It was a question that was asked of me. What's the difference, Tom, between a simulator and an emulator? Does anyone know the difference? Okay, so a simulator is something, a program that simulates the environment. And what I mean by simulator is it's not an environment. It's not a VM. That's what a simulator is. A lot of times it works inside of our existing Windows or Mac system, and it kind of makes it so it mimics or mocks up what it would be like if you were running in mobile. Okay? That's what a simulator is. It is not the system itself. An emulator is a VM or a system that's completely replaced or duplicated the machine itself. This is an emulator. So in Android, we have an emulator that is a replacement, if you will, for the machine itself. It actually has or duplicated all of the machine properties here inside of this virtual machine, which is what LDPlayer provides for you. That's the difference between an emulator and a simulator. Simulator is not the machine, but it gives you a close approximation of what the machine would be like. So we're going to have differences, my friends, first off, between the simulator and the emulator. There are going to be two differences there. All right. So because this might look like something in here, it's going to help us prototype, but we need to test it in the emulator every time. Okay. So simulator versus emulator. Cool. One thing to note is if I run the game like we had before, now if I try and use my simulator and using my mouse and keyboard will not function. It will not function. I haven't changed the scripts, but the reason why it doesn't function is because there is no mouse and keyboard on a mobile device. And because of that, it doesn't work. So I'm just letting you know, if you run the program and you're like, wait, Tom, I don't know why, but it's not working. It's not working because there is no mouse and keyboard on a device. And what Unity is trying to do is trying to get the closest approximation to what it would feel like to use a device. Okay. Next. So this is still part of setup. We've just got our simulator set up. This is what it looks like. I'm going to save my project. Okay. Next, what I want to do is I want to switch platforms. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go, to Build Settings. For now, I don't want to have a start scene. I'm just going to get rid of the start scene, so I'm going to delete it. I'm just going to have main for now, okay? Now, the target platform cannot be PC, Mac, and Linux or WebGL anymore. It's got to be Android. The only way you're going to see Android is if and only if you've downloaded all the Android components that I've asked you to download earlier. If you did not, this will not work. You will not even see an option here that is, you might see something like download components. For example, if I went to tvOS, it's going to say install with Unity Hub, right? It's going to ask you this. Or like a PC, a PS4 and Xbox, it's going to say, you know, open the download page or get stuff because there's some stuff missing, okay? And same thing if you didn't have iOS or Android, it would ask you to do something like that. So Android is where we want to go. And I want to switch platform. So before we do any configuration with Android, just click Switch Platform. And we're going to have to do this every time we do a lab from now on. Okay. So we're switching platforms to Android. Again, this is assuming that you've downloaded Unity properly in the past. You've configured it with Android like I asked you to from the very first day, right? But you may have not. And like I asked you earlier, please download and install the Android components that you require to run this thing. It's going to take a bit of time to translate or your project from PC, Mac, Linux to Android, just like it did for WebGL, but differently. Okay, so that's the first step. Now we are Android. We're building for Android, not for iOS or not for WebGL and not for PC or Universal Windows platform. Notice where it says Run Device. Run Device. If I click this thing here, it shows me my Samsung SM N97I1 emulator. So too it should show for you, because this is because I'm running my LDPlayer. If your LDPlayer wasn't running, or if you configured it differently, it will not show up here properly, like this. Okay, so please refer back to the setup part of the video that I asked you to already. I'm going to, instead of default device, I'm going to select my Samsung SM N971N emulator 5554. All right, I'm going to select this option. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm not going to let it go to whatever option it's going to go to on its own. I'm going to select the one that I want. Next, I want to go to player settings here. Player settings can be reached in a couple ways. One is from here, from build settings, like we've seen before. And the other one is if you go up to File or Edit, and if you go to Project Settings, it's going to bring up this Project Settings window. And then you can click on Player. So there's two ways to get to the player settings. We need to make some changes. This is not sufficient anymore, right? So what we want to do is up here where it says Centennial College, please do that. Your product name should be accurate. Let's make sure it says what it's supposed to say. We haven't been paying attention. So right now it's 8A. That is the project. It's switched on Android. I'm going to go one step at a time down the row here, okay? Down the row. Icon. I'm not going to change the icon. It's going to be an adaptive API 26 icon. Next, resolution and presentation. Okay, here's where we're going to get into some interesting stuff. We're going to try a couple things here. One, I do not want a portrait orientation, even optional. So please remove portrait, portrait upside down, but landscape right and landscape left are okay. So leave that alone. So if your user wants to hold their phone either from left to right or right to left, it shouldn't make a difference. If you wanted it, you would change these options right here. Okay. Start screen in full mode. Yes, full screen mode. We also want you to render outside the safe area. Absolutely. Otherwise, it'll be black outside the safe area. We don't want that. We also want optimized frame pacing. We definitely want those things. So all these options are still good. All right, so that is this. I've just taken off portrait. So portrait's not even an option. Okay, next. I'm going to click this closed and open up the splash image. Splash image is what's going to appear. You don't have to modify this here at this point. Let's close this. Other settings. Okay, this is key. So right now we have gamma for a space and auto graphics API is unchecked. We have Vulkan and OpenGLES 3. installed. So I have both Vulkan and OpenGLES. Okay, so far. We may remove Vulkan later. We'll see how it goes. Next, multi-threading is checked on. Static batching is checked on. Compute skinning is checked on. Normal map encoding is checked on. I'm leaving all these settings as normal. Okay, but as we get down to this level down here, this is where we get some interesting stuff. It says my package name is com.centennialcollege.comp397 blah, blah, blah. That's what I have up here. I'm going to override my package name. So it's reverse DNS order, which starts with ca.centennialcollege and then .comp397 W2021 lesson 8a. My minimum API level, guys, cannot stay at KitKat API level 19. It's got to go to something reasonable, all right? Like something like 26. Let me just make sure. I'm just going to refer to my notes here to make sure that I'm not going to give you the wrong information, because that would be not a good thing. It's going to bring up my build settings for my other projects that I have here. And I'm just going to check to see that I've got all the settings correct for you, so that way you don't have anything out of the ordinary that's messed up. Yeah. Yes. Okay, one thing we need to do is where it says the API level, it cannot be API level 19. Let's move this to 26 minimum. It's going to say automatic highest installed. You need to change your scripting backend from mono to IL2 CPP. That's required. And a .NET 4.0 standard, please. Please make sure you change those. Okay, it's going to take a second to re-import. Please do that. Notice it says ARM v7. That is the chip that you're using right here. And that's how you're connecting to this thing. You can choose one or the other. If you choose both, one or the other is going to work. If you have an ARM 64 based processor on your device, you can try that as well. I'm going to uncheck this because I only have an ARM v7 on this thing. Cool. So that is the majority of stuff. Publishing settings, I'm not going to change anything here. All right, let's see if everything works the way it's supposed to work. So again, resolution and presentation. We modify portrait as an example. We talked about that a little bit. I said how under resolution and presentation, I don't want portrait or portrait upside down functional. I don't want those things to be there. And under other settings, we have a gamma color setting right now. And we also have Vulkan and OpenGLES as an option. Both are turned on. We may elect to remove Vulkan if it doesn't build. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second. The rest we're leaving on. We're multi-threading and static batching. And let's also put dynamic batching on, please. And let's turn off compute skinning. So I don't want to do compute skinning. Okay, let's turn off compute skinning. I'm just going to make sure that I have everything on that I have to have on here. Low quality normal map encoding is XYZ, and light map streaming is good. I think we're okay. I'm just checking my options here just to make sure that we're all good to go. Let's move this version to 1.0 just because we're moving into a new version. Use incremental GC. That's compiler is going to be definitely used, right? I also want to go into quality settings for a second. So this is something that's going to change. So I'm going to go into quality settings here, and let's take a look at this little grid under quality settings. So what this is showing you is the quality for your devices. Right now we're showing ultra. Let's click on medium. It's different quality settings than it would be from what we're showing here. Okay. So medium is what we're going to have for our device. This means we're going to do full res texture quality. We're using a shadow mask, but our resolution for shadows are low. Just keep that in mind. We may want to change this later on to something like medium if we can. All right, that's good. What I want to do now is I want to build and run for Android with my target device being my Samsung SM971N emulator. All right, so let's go ahead and do a build and run. We'll do this a couple times because the first one may fail. We're going to do new folder. We're going to call this builds, just like we've done before. And we're going to go in there. Notice where it says an APK is going to be made, right? An Android package. We're going to choose Android as the name for the package to keep it simple. And we're going to save the game. Now, it says software of device Samsung SM971N, not supporting, right? It says 554 is not supported device. The connected device is running Android with an API level of 25, while the minimum level is API 26. Okay. That's perfect. That's why I wanted to check the API level. Let's go back and change our API level back to 25. Notice that it says NuGet is API level 25. 7.1 is the minimum device. Let's move back to NuGet. I'm okay with that. That's just the highest level that it'll run for my emulator. Okay, let's try that again. Build and run in my Android APK, inside builds, click save, and let's watch the build fail. If it's going to fail, time to fail. If it passes, fantastic. Let's see what happens. So, you know, if yours happens to be slower than mine, it's totally okay. If it even builds at all. Because this is the challenge when we build stuff. We're actually building for Android. This would be the same process if you used your own mobile device. So if you had your own mobile phone that was a Samsung Galaxy S10 or higher, it says OpenJDK platform library. Do I want to include it? I want to include private networks and click yes. Please do that. Just watch video forward until the build either completes or fails. Notice it says building Gradle project. That is like Android's package manager. And if everything goes well, it's going to copy it to my device, and it says everything worked. I should be able to see my game on my device. There we go. Take a look at that. And I can use my mouse to move, and I can even use my keyboard on Android to move around. This is what it would look like in the Android device, whether or not I have a simulator or not. Notice it's pretty finicky though, because of the way it works, right? So my device kind of works. It should work for you as well, but this is what it would look like on the mobile device. This is the emulator running. That's what we're seeing right here. Okay, so it's going to do the same thing that it did normally. You're going to see the exact same stuff happen as it did before. It's going to try and kick me out of here, right? As I'm moving, same kind of stuff that we did before. My enemies are attacking me quite nicely and even stalling where they're normally supposed to stall. Yay, running away, run away. And let's put in my mini map. M still works, right? As an example, and I can check it out on my device, right? But guys, there is no keyboard and mouse on my device, so how is this working, right? Well, it's doing its best to emulate a game controller. So let's go back here to my device. Let's go back here to my device, which is an LDPlayer, and just click the X button to tab out of it. So there it is. There's my lesson 8 build, and I can always start it again by clicking onto it again. It'll load the project right here in my emulator. Now, are you with me? We've just built for the LDPlayer. LDPlayer is fantastic. 9 out of 10 times it'll work properly if you put the right settings on. And it's not a lot of configuration, and it's super simple. So check mark if you're with me. X if you're still, yeah, Eric says still building. I know, Eric. It's going to take some time because my machine might be a little bit faster than yours. So don't worry about it. Don't get, try not to feel discouraged. Remember that I have different hardware than you, chances are. Okay, wonderful. I like it. This is a good start. Your build failed. Okay, what did it say, Kautuk? That it was not able to find your device? That's one of the main things that has a problem. You can't find your device. If it failed, it'll give you the reasons why. Okay. All right, so this is how it would work. And let's go back to our PowerPoint and think about the stuff we've done. So we've configured Unity to target the Android platform as a build target. We did that. Let's cross that out. We also configured LDPlayer to connect with Unity. We did this part. Let's cross that out. Now we're going to be talking about this. We already kind of did this one, but we haven't really finished this one until we configure mobile touch with Unity. All right, so we'll talk about this in a second. With or without a joystick asset. All right, so we're not going to use LDPlayer for this one. What I want to do is I want to run it here in the editor, and Kautuk, you should be able to run it in the editor too. And I can't control anything, right? It's impossible. I can't do anything here, up or down, left or right. How do I do it? Just to reduce my stuff in my game controller, my soundtrack is, my volume is pretty high. I'm just going to turn it right down. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck my audio device in my soundtrack. If I did this, if I unchecked it, and if I tried to run it, it will give me no errors, but notice that there's no sound, which is good. That's what I want, no sound, because it's going to take some memory up. But I have no input either. And also, notice my health is in the wrong spot. Even if I was to run it in LDPlayer, just for a second, notice that my project runs, and here's my health. Guys, be cognizant that this is not an accurate representation because LDPlayer is doing its best to try and emulate what it looks like to run your device. It'll do its best to run, period, on LDPlayer. However, notice that my health is outside of the safe area. So if I go to my 2D, and if I look at my my canvas for 2D, I'm going to scroll out here so you can see it. Here's my canvas, and I have my pause button. If I run the thing, remember how it works. I should be able to bring in this this button in here with a key touch, right? So I should be able to do that. And as well, there should be this part here should be inside of my screen a little bit more, not where it is right here. This is not accurate. So notice what's happening is it's outside of the screen space. Potentially, if my screen is oriented, so this is outside the safe area, I want this part to be slightly inside. Let's configure that properly. So I'm going to go first. Let's do the first thing first. Grab your object, which is your world space health bar or screen space health bar, right? And I want to grab these, the grab tool or the move tool, and I want to move this inside of the safe area. So this now will be working for mobile. It'll be exactly the same size as it was before. I'm going to save that. That's my first change because I'm moving it inside the safe area. And it doesn't matter if I rotate to the other one way or the other. This is where my health is going to start. First things first, the safe area is different for every phone. But one thing I want to do is the left corner here is something that I got to be cognizant of. Also, sometimes if I change phone types, let's suppose I change from a Samsung to an Apple iPhone 11, right? My safe area is still okay, but it's a little low for the iPhone. So just to be cognizant of that, I'm going to bring it a little bit higher. So on the iPhone, it's going to appear right here. All right, let's change back from the iPhone 11 to a Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. Okay, let me give you the numbers now. So from a health bar perspective, notice that it says my position on the x-axis is 356. Let's make it an even number. So if I said 360, right, that is pretty good, 360. And this is relative to the bottom left corner where the anchor is. By the way, you can anchor stuff to your safe area as opposed to the left corner of the entire screen, okay? Next, width is the same, height is the same, position on the y-axis is 105. These are good numbers. Leave them the way they are. So 360 by 105 is where my health bar sits. File, save. Okay. Two ways of doing touch I'm going to talk about. But first, I want to put this project as is up on GitHub. So I'm going to go File, Save Project. I'm going to close this off. And I'm going to put this up on GitHub. And I'm going to do this because I want to make sure that everything is okay. So I want to say git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say converted to mobile game, right? We'll say first draft. Git push, and we're going to push this up on GitHub. All the changes. Notice that it doesn't happen very long. Pushed up to GitHub. Let's grab that project and let's put this up as the final version. Your final version should be like mine, right? So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to here and under GitHub repos, I'm going to make a new link. I'm going to say lab 8 final. So you have that link as well. You can compare your link with my link, not copy it, but compare it, please. It's got to work for you to have everything happening. All right, cool. Let's launch Unity Hub again and bring up lesson 8. So again, I'm going step by step here. Step 1 was configuring LDPlayer and Android. Step 2 is trying it out. Try, pushing out from Unity to your LDPlayer, because one thing that'll happen, guys, especially for your mobile games that are right now working in WebGL, it may not even work on your mobile device. And there's a couple reasons for that. Your project settings might be wrong. Your project assets might be too big, because remember, this has limitations. It's a mobile device now. It's no longer a case where you have unlimited resources for the most part on a desktop. You don't have unlimited resources. You have very limited resources now on a device again. Back to that. Like a console, that's kind of what we're doing. We're kind of making it for a specific device, which is this right here. All right, let's talk about touch. Let's talk about touch a little bit. So touch is interesting. So there's two ways to do touch. Unity has touch built in by default. So if I was to go to input.touches, so if I was to go to the Unity documentation, and if I put input.touches for Unity, you can see that the scripting API for level 2021.1, as an example, has something called a touch. And one way to do it is basically to say something like, okay, for every touch in input.touches, then what I want is, for each touch, I want to, depending on what I'm doing, I want to change my position or do whatever. I can do multi-touch depending on how many fingers I've touched. It'll actually detect how many touches, right? For each touch, I can have multiple fingers touching the screen at the same time, right? So let's try this out and let's see what happens if I touch the screen, and let's get some information about my touches. So I'm going to go back to here, and inside of my player, I'm going to go to my player behavior and double click on the player behavior script. And here we are. Now we know that right now what we're doing with player behavior is when I input jump or I get access from a horizontal and vertical perspective for my from the horizontal and vertical gamepad, it works, right? Input.get access horizontal and vertical, no problem. Awesome, I like it, right? But what if I don't have a horizontal or vertical access? I don't have a gamepad as an example. By the way, if I was to plug in a gamepad, and for those people who are watching the video, I have my Xbox gamepad in my hand right now. And if I was to plug in my gamepad as is, and I was to turn it on, so here I'm just turning on my gamepad, so it's connecting to Unity. Notice it says Joystick connected Xbox Bluetooth gamepad, right? And I press play in Unity, then I have some limited options, right? I can still do some things with my gamepad, right? It might take some of these touches. Inputs, horizontal, inputs, and notice that it actually is doing something here, right? So I'm moving my velocity is changing, but my input from my controller isn't doing anything. Why is that? Most times my input, my joystick or my gamepad doesn't connect to my mobile device. So what Unity is doing here is saying, sorry, it doesn't work. But if I ran it with LDPlayer, so let's just escape from that, right? As an example, let's escape from this and go back here. So again, can't do it here, and I can't use my gamepad to move, right? But if I run LDPlayer, the same build, right? If I run LDPlayer and I try and use my gamepad, maybe I'm going to have some inputs, maybe, right? If I programmed it properly. Here I didn't. So you can see here clearly that touch works, but my gamepad doesn't work, right? So it doesn't matter what you do. I haven't programmed my gamepad. Most devices aren't compatible with a gamepad, and the emulation is, or at least doesn't expect that you have a gamepad, so it doesn't work. Okay, cool. How do I detect if I'm running on an Android device? Because one of the things is device detection, right? For now, we're going to kind of exit from these options here, right? Because it says it's grounded, and I'm going to get some X and Y coordinates here, right? For X and Y, and I want to get X and Y differently than this. So for now, we're going to comment them out. So this is input for WebGL and desktop. And now what we want is we're going to comment these out, right? And we're going to make it so that we have X and Y coordinates from a touch perspective. So how do I get that? Well, I'm going to say that for each, we're going to write that statement, that for each statement. Remember, whenever I write for each here, it's going to try and complete the statement for Unity. It's going to say for each variable, for each touch, right? For each touch in input.touches, input.touches, for each touch and touches, so however many touches we get, what we want is, I want to convert our touch into a world touch, not a screen touch. So I'm going to say world touch is equal to my camera, and I want to get whatever the main camera is. Right now the main camera is my player's camera, and I want to get screen to world point. I want to convert screen to world point and then my touch position. So I want to take my touch position and I want to make a conversion. It's going to create a different matrix where it transforms my position on the physical 2D screen to a 3D world touch. Now, what I want is for me to do some X and Y coordinates. I want to do some X and Y coordinates, right? And I want to do X and Y. They're both, what they are is they're both floats, right? So if you notice my X and Y coordinates here, there are no X and Y coordinates here, but I have, when I did this, float X and float Y. Let's just do that. But I want to do that up here, float X and float Y. I'm going to declare them up here, just for now. We'll say that it starts off as nothing, float X and float Y. We'll make that up here. And then what we'll do, actually we'll put it above these, just to eventually make it compatible with both. And we'll just take these away. And instead of Y, we'll make it Z, because that's what we're X and Z, not X and Y. And what we want is X is going to be equal to our world touch dot X coordinate, and Z is going to be my world touch dot Z coordinate. So that's the only difference between what I've done here and what I've done here. But it says, hey, local variable X may not be initialized. So what we want to do up here is going to say that let's start it at 0. If I did this and I started up at 0 here, right? And again, we have our X and Z, X, Z. It's every frame, every time we come through the update function, it's going to set them to 0, and then it's going to change the position immediately to whatever the X and Z is. I'm just pointing this out because this may affect the way our game functions. Okay, other than that, everything is the exact same. There is no jump yet because I don't have something like that, okay? But that is my X and Z. Cool, I like it, okay? And what I want to say is that we have a couple of things, right? We have our touches began, right? That's what we have. And we also want to keep track of where our touches ended. Just to keep track of that, I'm just going to go up to a private, something like where I want to keep track of that variable. So if I want to do some troubleshooting later, I can. I'm going to make it a private vector3 object, which I'm going to call m underscore touches ended. Okay, I'm going to call this touches ended. It's a private vector, and it's going to be used for debugging purposes. What I want to say is that when I touch, whatever the final touch is going to be, right in here, so wherever the final position of my touch is going to be, right, then what I want is for me to put in m underscore touches ended is equal to world touch. That's going to give me the three-dimensional cursor as an example wherever my world is. All right, so that is X and Y coordinates. So far, so good. All right, that's excellent. I want to say also something that, it really depends on where my object is, that it's going to, my X and Y, my X and Z is going to skip to this particular position. Just letting you know. So if I touch one place and then touch the other place, it's going to zap to that position immediately. Just letting you know. Okay, so this is how this works. Let's see how this works. Let's try it out in Unity. Does it work at all? Who knows? First, we touch it in the simulator, and then what we do is we touch it in the emulator. All right, so again, what I want to do is I want to touch my screen, and there was an issue, right? Look at what happened here. So I touched my screen, and as soon as I touched my screen and I moved it, right? So I'm here on my screen. If I touch it, and then it goes wild, right? And then it says screen position out of view of frustum. All right. Now notice my player camera is the main camera. Tag to main camera is my player's camera. So I'm trying to do the same touches that I did before, right? I try to do kind of this like touch on the screen, and it worked, but let's try it again. And this time what I'd like to try and do is let's output what my final touches is. So I'm going to say that debug .log, and I want m underscore touches ended .toString. I want to kind of output this to my log for every touch in input touches. So this is the way you do it. Take the touch, get the XZ, and we want to kind of take the move. And before we were doing it was we were taking our transform right and times X plus transform forward times Z, and we're going to move my controller times time dot delta time. Remember this? Time dot delta time? Not sure we can do this anymore the same way, guys. Just letting you know, right? Because things work one way on a device and a different way on a desktop. All right, so let's try it again. Clear this and try it again and see what happens. So I want you to see the difference here. So one thing is that I'm just locking my screen here, and as I touch, looks like on my camera I move from one to left. Look at the actual objects here: 631 and 1.9 and 30.7. Right, so that is my XZ. And then Y, does that change every single time? And it changes huge until I'm like way out in the middle of nowhere. But that's not what happens before. We're like, what was happening before? How come this has changed now? Like, what's going on with the touches, right? Because, I mean, it worked before. How come it's not working now? Well, there's a couple things that are going on here. One is every single time I'm setting my XZ to 0. And then what I'm saying is for every touch in touches, I'm taking my world touch and converting this to the XZ plane, right? That's what I'm doing it. So whatever my world touch is, X and Z is the thing that's moving up and down. And maybe it's not going to be the XZ plane anymore, right? But actually the XY plane. Okay, because X and Y is normally how we do it, right? We have the X on the X-axis, and we have things on the Y-axis, and not the Z-axis. Z-axis is deep. So let's change this so where it says Z, because that's how we were doing it before, right? Vertical and horizontal, right? what I want to do instead is that maybe is not something that I want to do for now. So maybe not the Z plane. Maybe if I touch up, then I want to go as I move up on my axis, right? Let's change this to the world touch on the Y, right? And this will be world touch. This will be the same. Let's change this to Y. Because again, we're just getting input from our world touch to convert it from X and Y to Z. Let's see how this works. Maybe this works a little differently than before. Remember, world touch and screen touch are two different things, right? For every touch in touches, right? And a touch is going to give us some information, right? We're going to take that touch position. The touch position is going to be a vector 2, X and Y coordinates, X and Y coordinates. And we're going to convert it to world touch, which is a vector 3. Because camera.main.screen to world point converts it from one to the other. All right, let's see if that works any different or if it works worse. All right, let's do the same thing. Just going to zap back out here to this. And now it kind of goes in, but it doesn't come out, right? So I can't zoom around the way I did before, right? I can't zoom around the way I did before. So yes, it worked. Yes, it's registering touches. Look at the touches here. So every time I go to my screen, top left corner, you can see that it will detect where on my screen I'm touching. So 3.4 and 2.1 and 2.4 is the same number I'm getting all the time. Look at that. Right? So it did do something. 3.1, 2.1, and 2.4. But I'm getting the same numbers, yeah? Look at that. Huh. Let's change these values. So let's change this to, so it also, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but transform forward is the thing that's happening here. So this is what this does. So this is one way of doing it, getting world touches by making a loop of touches and X and Y coordinates, right? That's what it does here. What if we just cared about right and left movement for now? Let's just do a test where we sub out this part and we just do left and right movements. Can that work? Let's try one thing at a time here because maybe that's an issue, right? Because we want to just change my object just from a left and right perspective. Let's see if I can move left and right instead of just moving forward and back, right? Let's see if that works. Can I convert it to left and right movement is what I'm saying. All right, going back. Run it again, and moving my mouse back. And if I move to one thing to the other, right, it detects only forward, left, and right movements, but I'm kind of stuck where I am. So let's go back into my player. Here's my player. Let's get out of 2D mode for a second to see what's happened. So let's get into 3D mode. Let's get into the correct position for my player. So I'm just going to kind of run it here so you can see what's going on. We're doing some troubleshooting, remember? Try and figure out what's happening. All right, here's my player, and it looks like we ran into a wall. This is nice, okay? But what we want to do is we want to say something that looks like this. We have nothing to compare it to, yeah? We have nothing to compare it to. So we start off here, and if I press plus, play, right? And if I go back to this and I press to the right, notice it moves to the right, immediately to the right, but it stops right there. Well, that's because we have nothing to compare it to, right? So wouldn't it be nice if I had some kind of direction? Let's put a direction in place. So float direction. We'll say that the direction is equal to 0.0f, right? And we'll start doing some comparisons instead of doing this, okay? So what I want is if my world touch.x, right? If my world touch.x is greater than my my transform.position.x, right? Then my direction is positive. All right, so let's think of it this way as well, right? So remember, I'm moving things from right and left. So I'll do that next. I'll say that if my world touch dot x is greater than my transform dot position dot x, the x-axis. So if it's greater than where I am right now, wherever my current position is, then and only then is my direction is positive, right? And so I can say that my direction is equal to 1. The other option is if my world touch, instead of being positive, is to the left of where my current player is, right? I don't know where my current player is, but if I touch the left side of the screen, if it's less than that, then it'll be negative. So my direction is negative. Cool. Positive and negative direction, right? And then what I want to say is that well, depending on what my transform position is compared to where I am. So in other words, like I want to change my move. And instead of transforming, I want to transform right, multiplied not just by x, right? Transform right multiplied by whatever the direction is, not x, right? So multiplied by x multiplied by the direction, right? So if my direction is positive, I'm going to go to the right positive. I'm going to go negative, I'm going to go to the left negative, all right? So I can set up a direction. So this is definitely a way of doing it. I'm just talking about ways of getting input right now, which is different than how we normally would get input, because we have a 2D screen here, right? And we're trying to get input. This is a way of doing it. All right, cool. I like it. And again, I want to go to here and I want to touch to the right or left. And depending on where my touch is, right, on my screen, then I want to be able to move to the right or left. Let's undo that change. Notice that it didn't move anywhere. And let's try it again. So if I touch the screen on the right or on the left, so over here, let's see what it says in terms of, instead of us printing out whether it's the way it is right now, world touch.x, which is actually, we'll just call it x, right? And this is x here as well. World touch.x, right, is what we want. We want to be able to detect if our, and we don't want to do this here, this if statement stuff. We want to get our for each loop, and then we want to mark down what our x and y coordinates are down here, right? So we have our x and y, x and z, but all we care about is getting our positives and negatives down here. Let's not debug out anymore this, because we know it's working. We know we get some kind of vector object. It's wrong right now, but we get a vector. Here is where we're going to check to see which direction we're moving in, right or left. So this is like try and move right, or back to this again. Try and move left, all right? Move right, move left. Let's try again. All right. And let's move to the right. And maybe we can get some input from the right or left, where we want to try and move from one side to the other. Let's print out, is it positive or negative? And one thing that we want to also do, my friends, is one thing that happens is we have this cursor lock happening right now. And the cursor lock is happening because we're getting an input from my mouse X and Y, right? Remember, we have a mouse look as well as an input with the WASD key normally. We don't have WASD keys anymore, but we're going to have touches, right? And we have our mouse position on here as well. So if you look at the camera, player cam, there is this camera controller. Let's just turn it off for now. I'm just going to turn the camera controller off as we're changing this to touch. So right click, turn this off, and then just try it out again. So now you can see the camera come left and right. This doesn't eliminate the cursor. I want that. That's good. Now what I want to do is I want to start outputting. Am I to the right? Am I to the left? What's going on with my direction? Is this even working? Let's print out my direction down here. So I'll say a debug.log, and we'll say for my direction, whatever that direction is. Let's see if I'm just getting a 1 or a 0, or what am I getting? All right, and run it. I'm getting -1 all the time. It's always to the left, right? Okay. I never touched the screen though, and I'm getting an x coordinate of 0, right? It is 0, and here is where I'm getting my touches. Let's do a couple things, some modifications. In my start, let's make this x, z stuff private variables up here. So we'll make it private. We'll call it float x and z just for now. And we'll move these things, we'll initialize them in here. We'll do this one time, and we'll do it inside of my start function, not every frame, because this is happening every frame, right? So we're initializing somewhere else. Okay, cool, awesome. X is this object. It's going to get world touches if I get any for every touches in touch. Otherwise, it's going to be 0, and it should not give me a positive or negative. Again, it says if my x is greater than my transfer position at x, and my x is less than my transfer position at x. Well, why is this happening? Because 0, and if you look at my player's position, starting off, my player is actually starting at 1.9 something, right? 1.9 something. That is my player's x position. We're actually comparing x positions. Okay. So let's just make this an even 2, just so that way we don't have a weird number. And I'm just showing you how this works. So this is 2. So 0 actually is my x position, right? So what I'm really saying is if my x, right, is my x on my screen, is it to the right of my x position or to my left of my x position? And what is my x on my screen? Well, there is no touch, which means that the screen starts off at 0, and 0, because it's to the left of my x position all the time, it's going to always be a direction of -1, right? Because I didn't do much, right? All I'm doing is I'm saying, comparing it to my current position x, and I'm saying that, hey, I'm touching something. And if it's to the left of my current position, that's what this is. If it's less than my current position, my x is, and it's always going to be less than my current position because, well, my current position starts off at 2. So 2 is always less. X 0 is less than 2. Therefore, it's going to be this. So I want to say that instead of 0, we're going to start off this as my current position. So my current position is x. So instead of starting off at 0, it's going to be, let's start off as my current position. So I'm going to say something like x is equal to transform.position.x. So it starts off at something as opposed to 0. Okay, now we shouldn't have anything. It should be 0 starting off. So let's try it again. And if I run it, it should just give me 0 all the time. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? If I move to the left, right? Or if I move to the right, depending on where I'm moving, the left or right on my screen, if we did everything correctly, then it will calculate where my screen is. So here's x, right? And I'm trying to figure out what my touch is from my touch position. Let's do the next, that's the next part. We're trying to figure this out, right? Okay, cool. So now it's 0, we've zeroed it out. So none of these fired, right? Now we're going to go through this loop. We're going to say that x, right, is whatever my world touch.x is. Let's print out my world touch.x every frame. And let's not do this because we don't want to put too many debug logs. Okay, so what's my world touch.x? Does this even compute, right, as an example? Because we're not getting any touches. So we're going to do debug.log, and we'll say x. I want to output what my x coordinate is. What is my x? And it won't be 0 anymore. It'll be whatever I touch on the screen, right? So by default, there's nothing. I touch on the screen, that's a 2. And I'm getting 2 all the time, right? There we go. So 2, 2, 2, 2. It's detecting touches. Look at this. It's detecting touches, but it's not changing the value of x. The value of x stays at 2 all the time. So once I set it in the start method, in update, I detect a touch, but it doesn't change what my touch position is on the x-axis. So that is a problem. Okay. I'm just, again, pointing this out to you because this is part of our issue. Our issue is, well, I'm pressing the button, I'm pressing my screen, but the value that I'm getting for x, as an example, and that's going to be equal to whatever the world touch is, world touch x. X I'm assigning to a world touch x, and it's only being assigned here for the first time once in start, right? Starts off at 2, but even when I change it, this world touch position dot screen to world point, right, is not what we're looking for. Let's see what the world touch dot x is instead of x. Let's see if that's whatever it is. So I'll say world touch dot x. I want actually the raw value now. All right, so I'm trying to show you what this does. And let's drag this up here just to make sure that it's before anything else happens. So in our for loop, right, depending on what I'm touching, what am I getting? Am I getting kind of any input? So again, run it. And you can see that I'm getting a continuous 2 all the time. So again, world touch dot x is always 2. Why is that? So anywhere I'm on the screen, I'm 2. What about if I was in a different orientation like this? Does it matter if I'm this way or the other way, right? Here's my x. Remember, we've locked our safe area in here, so it doesn't work, right? We are registering touches. We are. But we're not registering anything else. Okay, how about if I just say I want to get back to what I did before. So let's go back to m touches ended, and let's print that out. So again, debug.log, and we're going to say m underscore touches ended. That's a vector3 object. Let's see what we get from there. All right, does it actually change anywhere here? Because we're trying to convert from world space to screen space. Screen to world point is what we're using. All right, let's try it again, and let's run it. Okay, 2.10, negative 0.6. So y is actually 2.1, and it's the same value every single time, no matter how many times I touch the screen. Well, that's a problem, isn't it? 2.1 minus 0.6. Okay. Why is that? Because it's taking this camera, and the main camera screen to world point is what it's looking at. Screen to world point. That's how this touch works. It's working on screen to world point, right? And there is no main camera. The main camera is in the character. That is what I put the main camera as. If I get a reference to it, and I could say, let's get the main camera instead. Okay, so let's get the character's camera instead. So I'll say that, make a public, we'll call it a camera. And it's part of the player behavior. I'm not gonna search it up just for now. I'm gonna show you this. So public camera, and we'll call this player cam. There's my player cam. So now I'm doing it for sure. And instead of main camera screen to world point, I'm going to say that it's the player cam screen to world point with my touch position. Okay, screen to world point, touch position. That's what I'm looking. That's why I'm seeing the screen as an example, right? And let's make sure that inside of the player behavior script, we drag and drop that camera in there. So on the player, we're going to have this player camera where I'm going to drag and drop the camera, this one, in there. There's the player cam. Save it and run it. All right, still the same, right? No difference, because the camera that we're seeing here in screen to world space is the exact same. If I was running a 2D game, this would be fantastic, because my 2D world would be in an orthographic view, and it would map one-to-one what my camera is right here. Okay, so whatever my camera is looking at right here, it would map one-to-one. However, it's not mapping one-to-one. All right, instead, we need another system of input. And one of the best ways, you can see though that we're receiving touches. It's just that converting from screen space, where our screen space coordinates are, let's take a look at those, by the way. So what if I didn't convert before we go into that other way? All right, so if I, instead of converting, what if I said that I want my touch position? So I don't convert, touch dot position. So whatever my touch position is my world position. And I just want to touch my camera. So touch is ended is whatever my touch is, my touch position. Okay, so whatever it is, no conversion. Let's see what happens there if I do that. And just to show you this. So I should get some changes, but it's going to be big numbers, right? Because screen space is 2755, 112.1 and 00. And then if I move over here, it's 334. And if I keep moving, you can see that as I move around to the right, I can go to the right side of the camera, which is almost 3040. Look at that, almost 3040. And if I'm holding it to the left, as I'm moving to the left, you can see that it's clearly going 00, right? If I move it up, right, up the camera, up the way, you can see that on the Z-axis, or on the Y-axis, it changes. Here, it's where it's 0, so 0 is here for the Y-axis, and here is how we move up the screen. So on the XZ plane is all we care about, XZ. We don't have Z, the XY plane. We don't have Z. And down in here, right here on the bottom left corner, right in here, on this part right here, way down here on the left corner, that's where pretty much down in here, not here, but here maybe, is where X and Y are both 0, right here. So that's where X and Y are 0, okay? X and Y, we don't care about Z. So we want to convert that, right, our number, whatever it is. And I want to convert it to screen space. So when I touch on the screen, it's actually a touch in the world. That's how it would normally work, okay? And that's great if you have an orthographic camera. An orthographic camera will map one-to-one on the screen. So from a 2D game perspective, that will work great, okay? Let's go back and do this other coordinate space. What if I said, okay, I want my camera this time, so player cam, and if I say screen to viewpoint, what does that do? So screen to world point, it transforms a point from the screen space into world space, where the world space is defined as a coordinate system at the very top of your game's hierarchy. Okay? So 0, 0 would be the top of your game's hierarchy, right? So 0, 0 then would be in the bottom left corner of the screen relative to that space, right? So that's what screen to world space is. So screen to world space. There's other options here too, right? There's viewport to screen point, right? World to screen point, right? And screen to world point, and screen to viewport point. Okay, what's the difference? Let's go screen to world point, viewport point. So if I take this and do a if I drag in my position, which is my the actual place I'm touching again, right? So touch dot position. Remember, that's an actual position on the screen in X and Y coordinates, right? I want the X coordinate now of this. Let's see what I get when I go screen to viewport point. Remember, my viewport is normalized screen coordinates, right, from 0 to 1. So let's see what I get now when I do that. So if I was to run this now, this should be, if I move here, then it should be something like 0.5, and this should be 1, right? Where 0 is the far left and 1 is the far right. Up above here is the top. So you can see this is 1, 1 up here. 0, 0 to 1, 1, where it normalizes the coordinate space of the screen. So whatever the screen size is. So that's what we get when we convert from my screen space in pixels to viewport space, screen to viewport point. I take my position, take my player camera, and I convert it to whatever my camera is looking at from a viewport perspective. Okay. So remember the options? Screen to, I want to take my screen to viewport, screen to world point, and if I go back to screen to world point again, screen to world point says that depending on what I'm touching, right, I'm going to convert to some place in 3D space. Someplace in 3D space, and this is where it's not working. So what's another way to do the touches? So touches work. This is going to work for 2D touches. And I could very well come up with a system of touches, but there is a little shortcut for us to make it easier. So I'm going to go into here, right? And I want to download a little asset store application. So what we can do is under my window, I have in the package manager under my assets. So if I go to my assets, what I want to look at is I'm just going to go into 25. There's something called the Joystick pack, and I'm going to give you this link for a second. Let's go into View and Asset Store. This is the Joystick pack. The Joystick pack is a very simple joystick that looks like this. 4 joysticks, 24 designs, and what does this include? It includes some very basic things, some scripts as well, that come with a dynamic joystick, a fixed joystick, and a floating joystick, and a variable joystick. Some different scripts that it comes with for us, okay? The Joystick pack. I'm going to grab this link here, and I'm going to copy it. It's a free download, so there's nothing for you to pay. Let's put this up on eCentennial. So I'm going to go to here to the lecture part. And we're going to make new link. And we're going to say that this is the Joystick pack. Open as an external resource. So it's going to take you to the asset store on Unity, and you'd have to download it for yourself for the project. I'm going to download, I've already got it downloaded. I'm just going to import it for me. So again, for me, where it says Joystick pack, I'm going to go to, this is currently downloaded, but I want to import it. And it shows you all kinds of things here, including examples, sure, and the documentation. I'll include it all. So let's import that. Awesome. So what does it give you? What does the Joystick pack give you, right? Because, we struggle trying to make this work or whatever. There's something called prefabs. And underneath that, we have a few of them. We have a fixed joystick. That's a prefab. Let's take a look at what that looks like. It looks like this. It's in screen space, right? So it's some kind of little button that we're normally used to. There's a dynamic joystick, which looks very similar to that. A floating joystick and a variable joystick. By the way, they all look very similar. Let's just do a fixed joystick for a second and see how that looks, right? Our fixed joystick might look a little better than than what we had before. Okay, fixed joystick. So I'm going to grab my fixed joystick, this prefab, and I want to bring it into my canvas. So where that is inside of joysticks. So I just downloaded this little asset, joystick pack. And inside prefabs, there is a fixed joystick. And then what I want to do is I want to go out to my scene where my canvas is. So here's my canvas. I want to drag and drop my fixed joystick into my canvas like this. So fixed joystick into canvas. Hey, look at that. But we need to go into 2D again because I want to make sure that my joystick, which is here in 2D, I want to move it so that it's inside the safe area and a reasonable amount of space above my health bar. Because my health bar is right here. I want my joystick to be a little bit above it. Maybe, remember that the way it is right now is if I put my joystick on the left-hand side, right, then it's going to cover my health bar. My health bar is actually going to be in the wrong spot for mobile now, right? Because here's my joystick and my finger is going to be right here above my health bar. So what we want to do is let's move my health bar up to the top left. This makes more sense for our situation. I'm going to move it to, on the x-axis, 360 is the same, and something like 1340. Okay. Here's our little joystick. Let's move this joystick down now because we can afford to move it down a little bit lower, right? And we can also make this joystick bigger if we want to, right? So right now our fixed joystick, right, as an example from a scale perspective is 111. Let's make it like twice as big. And you may decide not to make it this big, but I think it's better to be bigger than smaller, in my opinion. Make sure that it moves inside of the safe area completely. Something like looks like this. Okay? And that is your floating joystick. The other thing I'd like, I don't want it to be opaque this way. This opaque, by the way, you can change the colors, and this is a very simple design. You can replace this with your own design. But let's change the colors from opaque white to a semi-transparent white, where I'm going to change this to something like 128. So it's somewhat transparent, so I can see through it. And that's the ring, all right? You can also change the handle, which is the middle, so it's also semi-transparent. So I'm going to click on the color. I'm going to go down the handle and go to 128 for the handle. So you can see the joystick, but it's semi-transparent, so it doesn't occlude everything that we're seeing here. All right, cool. Our input scheme has to be different now. All right, so this isn't the way we want to do it. What we want to do instead is, let's go back to our code. So reload. So when we reload our code, right, now we want to do the update slightly different than this. Okay. What we want to do instead is we want to use the joystick, right? That's what we want to use. Okay, it's pretty simple. We're going to input the same input dot that we had before, input dot get access, but instead of input dot get access, we're going to do an input dot something else. We want to get input, right? So instead of input, we're not going to use the input system. We have a joystick instead. So let's get rid of this. So this is a nice idea, but no, it didn't work for mobile. All right, mobile, bye-bye. It's not going to work. This part, just not going to happen. All right. I like it, but sorry, it's just not working. Okay. I need some kind of joystick sensitivity. All right, that's what I need, some kind of thing. I also need the ability for me to have my controls mapped a little bit. So what I'm going to do in the top, right, instead of putting in my player camera and my touches ended and all this stuff, let's get rid of all that. All right. It's going to cause an error. Don't worry about it. Let's just get rid of all this stuff because it's not the way we could do it, right? I'm going to go to the top where it says movement. And before movement, I'm going to put some controls. So again, I'm going to put a header. And I put a header that says controls. And underneath the controls section, I'm going to put a couple things. A public joystick. Notice that it computes because we downloaded that little input, where I'm going to call this joystick. Okay. And I want a public float, which I want a couple things: a horizontal sensitivity and a vertical sensitivity. All right, so horizontal sensitivity. And I also want a public float, which is a vertical sensitivity. So I want sensitivity for both horizontal and vertical as an example. Okay, so those two things I want. We may or may not use that right now, but I need a reference to this. And what I want to do now is I want to say something like this. I want to say that, okay, cool. I'm going to get input from my joystick, right? And if my joystick horizontal, right? So instead of input.getAccess horizontal, I'm going to say something else, right? Whatever that is, that horizontal, right? I'm going to say that. Let's go back to this. I'm going to say float x, right? That's going to be equal to joystick dot horizontal. All right, that's what it's going to be. And I'm also going to have float z, like we had before, right? Float z is going to be equal to joystick dot vertical. So something similar to what we had here on the XZ plane. Let's put this transform back in here for a second. So now everything's the same, right? We have a couple of things here. We have our joystick horizontal and our joystick vertical, right? And I know that I have a horizontal sensitivity and a vertical sensitivity, right? I may or may not use it. Like I said, just some kind of horizontal, number, right? Before we go into anything else at all, let's see if I move my joystick around, right, as an example, what these numbers are. Let's just get a debug log. Let's just get my x-axis. So we'll say that joystick x, and then we'll say that x is what is going to be printed out, plus x, right? I want to see what this looks like when I touch my joystick on that side. Okay, now the other thing is I want to go to here inside my project, and let's take a look and see if what I get when I go to my player. So here's my player. On the top, I put it on the top. I have joystick. I'm going to drag and drop the fixed joystick itself, the whole prefab, on top of this fixed joystick. From a sensitivity perspective, right, from a horizontal sensitivity and and the controls that I'm looking at from that kind of perspective, we got to think about what those are. For now, let's just put values in here like 0.1 and vertical sensitivity. Let's put that at 0.1 as well. So something like really small. So anything like lower than that is we don't care about, but we'll see how it goes. All right, let's run this thing and let's see what happens now. So I don't move around, touches don't matter. Notice my joystick 0 is 0, but if I go to the right, I move to the right and left. Look at that, right and left, move, right? And up and down, now move around. This is good. This is what we wanted. So right and left, up and down, that moves around like we normally would, okay? Makes sense? So this is my left joystick. Think about this as if I had a controller, right? I would move my left stick, left and right, right? Now what I want is another one on this side to move my mouse look, all right? I'm doing a 3D game here, so this is going to be quite difficult to emulate on the screen because I need touch, right? But notice that totally worked. That is exactly what we're looking for from a movement perspective. Liam says if you do world touch dot x minus 0.5 times 2 and z, that'll work as well. I'm just showing you another way of doing it. Okay. Let's bring in another joystick. So this joystick here, instead of fixed joystick, let's rename this fixed joystick to left stick. That's what that's going to be. And what we're going to do is we're going to Control D. We're going to duplicate the left stick, and we're going to call this right stick. So we have multi-touch, right? Right stick. And we're going to move the right stick to the right side of the screen, something on the other side. All right? Okay, so that's kind of left stick and right stick, where we can kind of have a 3D view, right? So very similar to what we did with the left stick, the right stick is going to represent the mouse. Now, this is where it's going to be a little weird, right? Because our stick is not a mouse, it's a stick, right? It moves up, down, left, and right with some places in between. For example, if I go back to my mouse look, which is inside of my player behavior, so I'm just replacing, right? So I go to player, and if I go to my player camera, I'm going to turn it back on, but it has its own script. Here's my script. And it says my mouse sensitivity is what I'm looking at right now, right? Well, what I want is, just like before, we want some kind of, and we'll call this controls, right? Which is a header. So my header is controls. And I'm going to have a joystick, which we're going to call joystick, right? And I'm also going to have a horizontal and vertical sensitivity. I don't need them right now, but we may want to add them in later. So grab this, put them over here, grab this, put them over here. Horizontal and vertical sensitivity. Here's my joystick, right? And let's drag that, let's do the drag and drop stuff from the second joystick, which is the right stick. So the other joystick, maybe make this public, Tom. How about that? The other joystick, which is this one down here, let's do the same thing, 0.1 and 0.1. We don't need it right now, but we may use this later. I'm putting it in just so we can have sensitivity if we need to. Let's drag and drop that right joystick now from the canvas. So if I go to the canvas and take my right joystick and pull it in, you can see that now the right stick fix is kind of connected, okay? Similar to what we did with our mouse controls, or my player control, I have this input.getAxis mouse x times mouse sensitivity, right? Let's replace these. So again, I'm just going to comment these out because we may come back to this later. We'll call it mouse just to keep it the same. And we'll go float mouse x is going to be equal to my joystick, right? Dot. And remember, x-axis is horizontal, right? My joystick horizontal. For now, we're not going to multiply it by anything, right? Just x is horizontal. And also we're going to say my mouse y is joystick dot vertical. All right, so we're going to get those mouse x and mouse y, and let's see if negative mouse y makes any sense, okay? Because now we're going to have a joystick and not a mouse. We may want to not put this in at all. Let's see how that works now for a mouse. So here's my two joysticks, my left stick and my right stick. And now I'm going to move my mouse. So again, what I want to do is move my mouse around left and right, and it works, but it's really, really slow. And see that I can't really do much. I'm just pointing this out because this works okay, right? But on the emulator, it kind of has a funny way of doing it. If I go up on the emulator, it does kind of some weird stuff. And same thing with the right turns, that's okay. But we're looking like way up at the sky. So mouse up goes up, mouse down goes down, right? But, right? And let's go back to my player behavior and get rid of that little debug log, which is taking up cycles. So depending on the place you touch on the screen, would have two joysticks happening. It's not as nice. And the other thing I want to tell you is when I go back to from a 3D perspective, if I go to my camera controller here for a second, let's do a couple of things. I want to change my lock state. Let's get rid of that lock state stuff. That works great from a WebGL perspective or a, that kind of thing. But from a, something else, that doesn't make any sense. So that's one thing. Also, remember my sensitivity, we don't have numbers in there right now. We're not using numbers. We're not multiplying anything. But we may want to multiply it by some value because it's really slow. That's why I put them in there. So again, if I was to run this, and I'm just looking at this one now, right? So going to the right, going to the left, that looks pretty good, right? That's how it should work. So up, down. Now this is not reversed. This is kind of normal, right? So I'm not moving my actual object around, just my camera. And this moves me back and forth. So that's how it works. So I need two controls, this one and this one, right? So this is my look. This is kind of simulating that. And then this one moves me back, right? As I move here. And I have almost the same functionality that I had before, except what am I missing, guys? I'm missing jump. All right, so all the same stuff. I'm still getting hit at the same thing as I had before. This guy is still stuck the same way he was stuck before, nothing different there. But my joystick is what I'm looking at from that perspective, right? So move back. He's going to try and beat me. And he's going to try and kick me out of the world, which is what he's trying to do. I'm going to move away from him. And he's going to keep trying to kick me until I'm like way off the world. And that was what the thing was before, right? It's going to keep kicking me and then until I'm done. And then I'll respawn. But there is no way, right? There is no way that I can do something. So we got to think about a way of doing it. So what do you guys do normally when you move in the world? You can use these joysticks, Liam. I'm not going to make you make your own. I think this is good enough. All right. If you want to replace the look and feel of the joystick to make it different than yours, like let's say, for example, different colors, different asset, whatever, I'm okay. But this idea is very basic, right? One thing is what I want to do is make sure that this right stick is, let's move the safe area around. So let's suppose it was like this. Say the person was playing on this side. We want to move the right stick over a little bit this way. So again, just like from a design perspective, we want to respect the safe area could be on either side. So that's probably a good spot to be on the right or left, right? Right, left. And if you notice here on the position, 2632, let's make it 2630 and 279. What do we make it for the other one? It's both 279. Let's make it so that on the left it's 280, and we'll make it on the right also 280. So that's the actual position. So 2630 is my position on the right, and on the left it's 417. Let's make that 420, and let's move that on the other side. Let's just rotate it so we're looking like we got lots of them. 420. People are going to laugh at me. 420. So 420 and, like I said, on the left, and 2630 on the right, based on our resolution. Okay, and remember that one thing we have to do is we have to figure out where we want this relative to the screen. So on the left stick is going to be anchored to the left side of the screen. So if you look at the left, we want this to be here. But the right stick shouldn't be on the left side. It should be geared towards the right side, bottom right. So we're going to go here and click the bottom right side for this thing to be anchored on the bottom right. That way, if we have different screen sizes, it'll be proportional to the screen. Okay, which is important. Otherwise, you'll have a weird, setup. All right, cool. Let's try what we have and output this to mobile. Okay, so one thing we did was we made these changes. Let's file save project, and let's run this thing and let's see if this works on mobile. So this works here, no problem. But what about on mobile? So I'm going to go File, Build Settings, and I'm going to say Build and Run. It's going to ask me to replace my Android APK and save. And let's see if it works again. So it's going to do a progressive build, hopefully, and it won't replace everything. But one thing we're going to have is we've removed input now with X and Y coordinates, and we've put in input with joysticks, right, on the right side and left side. My friends, we need a button, some jump button. The jump button on a machine, on a joystick, on some kind of gamepad is a separate control, right? And usually it's the Y button or the A button or something like that, Y or A. And it's usually, if you hold your device, just like you would a gamepad, it's going to be above and to the right of the controller, okay? So we got to think about a button that we can make, right? So it's going to emulate what it's looking like over here. Let's try this again now. And I'm going to run this inside of here. And let's see if it works. So I can look up and down, left and right. Looking pretty slow on mobile device though. Just letting you know, like really slow. This is how slow it is, right? So my emulator is like super slow. And this is how slow it's going to be here. This is pretty fast though. So you know what? Horizontal sensitivity is pretty good, but this part, I'm not so sure I want to make it so slow. You got to try this out on a device and see what this looks like. But this is kind of what it looks like right here. Try it out for yourself. Basic controls. You need to change the sensitivity, and this is where you can have the screen. But how do I put in buttons now, for my screen, right? Because I need to have some kind of screen to world space for my button. How do I do that? Because one thing is I want to click, but next time I want to press, right? I want to be able to press a button. I want to click a button because remember, there's no keyboard, right? What I have is on the screen, right? This works for me, this first version. So I'm going to go back to LDPlayer. Sorry about that. Let's go back to LDPlayer and let's stop this. And let's, what I want to do now is I want to save everything. So File, let's stop this. File, save project, right? And then what I want to do is I want to exit. I want to put this up on GitHub so you have it. Okay. So back to my controls, here they are. I'm going to say git add dot, git commit -m. I'll say added twin stick controls, git push. All right, so pretty good, right? Any questions so far with what we've done? How do you get the build on the emulator, Liam? Well, we talked about that earlier, but I'll tell you again. Let's run this thing again. So again, I'm going to go back to Unity Hub. I'm going to click on this. And let's talk about the emulator a bit. Okay, so let's go over the emulator steps one more time. One, the first important step is this. If I go to build settings and do you see your device here? This is the first step, Liam. Yes or no? If you see your device here, that's pretty awesome. That's the first step, right? That means it's good, right? Android's got to be the build. And now, what did it say for you? Did you get an error, Liam? Like, what were you getting when you tried to push it to the emulator? Still building. Okay. If you don't get it here, if you don't have it here, you'll never get it to the emulator. The emulator works only if you have this part. It actually shows the device that you're running on. Okay, while Liam's building, let's do some next parts. So we want to place buttons up here too, right? We want to put some buttons. You know, some place where it's above the controls or next to the controls, right? On the right side. Does it automatically go to the emulator? Yeah, if you said under the file build settings, if you said that the run device is specified as this, not default, it has to be this. Okay, and it has to be also over here where it says Android, it has to be switched to Android. Right, so this has to be moved to, or you want to change the platform target to Android. If this little thing is up here or somewhere else, it's not going to build to Android. Okay, so next part. So how do I do mobile buttons, right? So that's the next part that we have to think about. How do I do mobile buttons? So if I go to mobile buttons, and if I look at something like for Unity, what is there anything different with mobile buttons and doing anything else? So again, UI buttons working on Android. Unity answers mobile device input for Unity. How do I get that? So we have a couple things, right, for mobile device input. The input classes offers access to touchscreen, accelerometer, geographical location input. Okay, so this is pretty good. And it gives you the touch, remember, touches and touches began and all this kind of stuff. What about buttons? So what if I make a regular button, like somewhere on the screen? So let's add a button. So canvas, here's my canvas. And I want to add a button. So add in a UI. I'm just going to make a regular button, not a Text Mesh Pro button, just a regular button. Regular button. And I want to move the button to the right. And let's get in there. So I'm just going to move this really much bigger and just move this to the right here. So here's my button. It's pretty small relative to this, right? And let's do a couple things. I want to make my button, right now it's squarish. That's fine. It's fine. But let's make it so that the button says jump. So this is the jump button. Okay. Jump button. And right now, by default, my source image is a UI sprite that looks like this. But right now, my sprite is my height, as an example, and my width are different. They're wide and long. And let's make it so it is like this big. So again, relative to what it looks like, let's make it so it's something that looks like the handle, or maybe a little bit smaller than the handle, right? So the way to modify that is if you go here on the top, there's a rect tool, and you can make this button look the way you like. Let's make it squarish, but it could look, you know, kind of round if you want as well, right? And I'm just going to make the, where it says button, under jump button, we're just going to make it say jump. Actually, we'll make a, you know, kind of a J or a special button, like an A button. So we'll say it's an A button. So A, and we'll make that image on the A really big so it looks like the A button. Now it's going to be square because that's the graphic we have, but we can change the graphic to a circle too, right? Because all the buttons that I have on my controller are a circle, right? Remember that this handle, if I click on the handle itself, there's two parts. There's the right stick and the handle. And the handle is handle plane. Let's use the handle plane for this one as well. So instead of a UI sprite for the button, let's change this to handle. There's handle outline, handle ridged, handle plane with arrows, right? Handle outline, handle plane. Okay, handle plane. I like that. So that's the shape of the button. It's going to be round. And what I want to put for the button is the text of the button. So for my jump button text, you can see that the font size is 14. Now there's something you can do, right? Now it says align by geometry. That's cool. And one thing there's another thing called best fit. I like best fit, minimum size and maximum size. Best fit gives me an A in there, and that A may be too small because that's going to be where your finger is going to be, right? We can also make this button twice the size if you want to, or 1.5 times the size by going to the jump button and then just changing the scale to 1.5. And typically the A button is a green button, but you can make it whatever size you want or color you want. I'm just going to make it so that the this button is kind of semi-transparent, so it looks like this. And also what you want to try and do is definitely align this so that it is kind of over the other button, whatever the position of this button is here, which is on a Y position. And let's make sure that this button here is also the anchor point is to the right. So again, my anchor point is bottom right. So it's relative to the right side of the screen, for sure. It's on the right side, right? So now we can look at my button and my right stick. So if I look at my handle on my right stick, or my right stick itself, we can see that the position on the x-axis is -410. Let's make sure that this is the same. Let's see what happens if I go -410. How does that look? That looks pretty good, right? It looks almost like it's directly aligned to this one, okay? And, you know, this is the A button, right, as an example. Again, you can make this, it could say jump or whatever. You can do whatever you like. You can have a little symbol there that shows jump, right? All kinds of stuff that you want that's in here, right? For you can make your own little controller. Okay, 410, and let's make it so that the position on the y-axis is something that's reasonable, like 760, as opposed to some weird number. Cool, the A button. All right, we need a script for the A button to work. So the A button doesn't even compute. What if I run this thing locally? Can I even click on the A button with my finger? Can I click on it? And it looks like it's receiving input. That's a good sign. My button should receive input. Okay? And I want some kind of key down event. Well, each button by default has a key down event. So here's my on click. I need some kind of controller for this. And it now, again, it's up to you how you want your stuff to work, right? You could put it as part of the canvas. You can make a canvas controller that keeps track of all the stuff on the canvas. You could make it so that it's another script altogether, but we need a script for the button when it's pressed, okay? Or you can make it as part of the player. So for example, the player has all the script for movement, which makes sense, right? So here's my left stick, and I want my jump button as well. All right, so my jump button is going to be a thing that's going to be kind of something in here. All right, so let's go into my player behavior script, and let's add in my jump button. So we're going to say a new public method that we're going to say, it's going to return void, and it's going to be on jump button pressed, right? When the jump button is pressed, then what do I want to do? Well, then I want to execute this jump. So instead of velocity, blah, 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 whatever it's going to be, whatever it is, with the jump sound play, this would be great, but we're going to have a separate little function here because later on we want to support web screen as well. So we're going to say void, and we want to have this private function just do a jump. Okay, and we're going to take this code out of where the jump button is, and I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to put it here, paste it in there. Okay, and I'm going to call this jump, just so that way we have backwards compatibility. I'm just going to kind of gray this out. So comment it out, commented this out, so we have everything ready to go. Nice, nice. Excellent, excellent. And what I want to say is if I'm grounded and I press the jump button, So if my jump button is pressed, then, right? If I'm grounded, then do it. If is grounded, then jump, right? If I'm not grounded, don't jump. It's going to be the same jumping that I did before, right? This jump stuff. But before I was checking a button. Now I was checking a space bar for jumping, and now I'm doing the button on jump button pressed. Okay, cool. I made a public function though. Public, it has to be public. Okay, next. In my button control. So now going back to my canvas. In my canvas, inside of my jump button. Okay, so where my jump button is. Here's my jump button. I have an on click, right? I need to click a plus button here. And I need to drag and drop the object that has the script on it. So I'm going to take the player object and drag and drop it onto this. So my whole player is going to be dragged on there. And then I'm going to choose this no function. I'm going to go down to where it says player behavior. And then it's going to say on jump button pressed. That's going to be the function that's going to be invoked when I press the jump button. Okay, let's try it out and see if that works. So run. And if I press the jump button, then we're good to go. Right? Same thing as normal. So buttons are really easy to make, right? And what we want to do is, if I want to make the menu come up, normally it's some kind of menu, right, that comes up here. I want to make kind of a little menu button up here, like an info button. So that's what I want to come up here, and that's going to bring the menu down. And then the menu button is going to be here, right? Because this menu, right, which is inside of my screen here, right? My control panel, it also needs some kind of input, right? Here's my control panel. And the way I activate my control panel is there's some kind of code that activates my control panel to make it come down, remember? So my pause button, well, that is working on my pause script, which is pausable. Pausable is an object that is kind of an empty object that has a little script on it that I put it in here for now, right? That kind of basically tells me if I'm on or off. That's what the pausable does. And what it says is for each script that has a script, that is disable all the scripts in my game. And this is one way of doing it, but there's another way we're going to talk about later on. But how do I activate it? Well, I have my player behavior, and my player behavior has moving, so it's not here. Key code M for map. Wow, that is definitely something I want to enable. I want my maps to be enabled with my buttons. So again, let's think about which button. If my A button is the one that I want to map to my jump, and by the way, sometimes it's Y, right? And we could make it the Y button and make the A button some kind of attack, right? Then maybe you want to make the shoulder button or something else that is the map or something else, some other button. For now, though, it doesn't really matter, right? We're going to make it so that the B button is the map, okay? And the Y button is the jump. So we'll make this Y instead of A. So again, we'll just change the text on it. So we'll say this will be the Y button, right? And we'll configure this to make it somewhat similar to a controller. So we'll move this up a little bit, and we'll Control D, duplicate this button. So we'll kind of make it come down and kind of do one of these, right? So we'll say this one is the B button. So this will be called the, and this will be the map button. That'll come up. So everything's on the right-hand side right now, right? My map button, and my map button is going to be the B button. Okay, so YB, or Y for jump, B, and then A for action, right? And again, you have to figure out the correct spacing. You can also download an asset for this where you have some assets where there's different colors. For example, the Y button could be a yellow asset. So you could tint this whole thing yellow for the normal color and so on. Okay, it's up to you. I'm not going to do the changes of color here too. Color tint is the way it works right now. We can also do a sprite swap or an animation. Color tint is not so bad though, because color tint allows you to have a normal color, which is instead of a white, could be a yellow. So let's say make it more of a yellow color, right? So a yellow button. And then the B button is probably a red button, right? Which brings up the map. So to kind of simulate what it would be like in an Xbox controller, right? We have a red button, right? You can see how that looks right there. And then we could control D for the other buttons. If I want more buttons, I can add them in. One thing is that the B button is not going to be the player behavior on jump. We got to make another one. So let's make another B button. So on player behavior, we have the jump button and we have this key code on M. So this is show the minimap. So let's make another function, void show minimap, or toggle. It's actually a toggle minimap. Void toggle minimap. You can see how the code works now, right? I want to take this code, I want to cut it. Maybe there's going to be other code in there too, and I want to call it here. But I also want to comment this out right now because there is no key down. We're going to bring it back later, where we're going to kind of listen for which device it is. Is it a WebGL? Then we'll use the input.get key down. If it's, so we'll have that as a fallback, right? But we want to toggle the minimap based on the button, and we want to make a button press, right? We're going to say public void on map button pressed, whatever that map button is. And we're going to say that we're going to toggle minimap, which is going to do the toggling that we want before. Okay, cool. So there's our toggle button pressed. Let's go back to here. And now what we want after this is to do the same thing, but instead of it targeting on jump, we want to target player behavior on map button pressed, a different event. And once I've done that, then let's see what happens if I run it. So press the button. We can toggle the minimap on and off. That's pretty good, right? And notice what happened is once we pressed it once, the button turned different colors, right? So there's a highlighted color and a pressed color and a selected color and so on. This is definitely something we have to play around with because on the game itself, we pressed it and it highlighted it, and now we have to go back to normal again. So what happens is when we go, this is my normal color, but what happens when I press it, my press color? What does that look like? And it's a darker version of the color. So 200, 200, 200 is a darker version than white. It's lost a little bit of color. So you want to move to 200 on the red axis, right? Only. So I go back to the red and I want to say, well, you know what? When I'm pressing the button, I want to go back on the red axis to 200. So that's going to be a kind of a slightly lighter color than that. So here we go. Let's do the same thing. I want to say that it's normally red, but I want to toggle back to 200. That is the color that I'm going to go to. So a different color red than this one. That's the pressed color. Okay, same thing with the Y. So Y, right? We're going to go to the same color when it's pressed. So kind of this color here, 255, and make sure that it's the right color, guys. This should be all 255, 255, if I'm not wrong, for yellow. Might as well make this yellow too, so it's not golden. Right now it looks golden. That might be the right color you want, but I want to make mine like super yellow. So yellow color, right? And then, but when it's highlighted, when it's pressed, it's not going to be as, these values are going to go down to 200. So 200 and 200. So kind of another color. That's kind of the same vein. And you can do the same things with all these if you really want to. All right, so let's try that out now and see how that looks here on the controls. So press this, turns on the mini map, and this makes me jump. Nice. Okay, one more button and we're done for today. We need some kind of button control for the thing to pause the screen, and it's got to be somewhere where we don't do it by accident. We can't have it here. This is our control area, right? So you can imagine if I want by the way, this isn't correct. This is incorrect. We want to take this button here and put it to the right, to the left a little bit. So this button, instead of being aligned where it is, we want to move it to the left. Something like that looks like this, right? Where, again, think about the buttons in real life, right? What you have is you have a button here and a button a little bit higher up, right? Where your controls are offset, right? If you want to emulate a kind of a keypad. If not, you can always leave it there. It's just that you're going to have to move your hand higher halfway up the screen. So as long as you're okay with that, and we have to play with those input values because that may not be correct. But this, definitely, we don't want to control here. We don't want it something within reach. You want the player to kind of reach out and pause the game by something way up here, like something like where this menu screen comes up and it says paused. It's something else. All right. Let's save the game. And let's think about what control we have for our script. So let's take a look at our scripts. We have our camera controller. Camera controller moves our mouse around. Control panel controller. All right. And control panel controller basically says that it's going to control the panel to come down when the key code tab is pressed. This is nice, but we want to toggle this on the screen. Let's make a new method. So we'll say, we'll make it a void toggle control panel. All right. And this toggle control panel is going to be all of this, right? Actually, what you really want is move control panel up or down. If it's on screen, we're going to have this whole thing. Whenever I click this button, it does this, right? So I'm going to kind of grab all this part, and it's going to go into my toggle control panel, which is this. And then I'm going to call toggle control panel from in here, right? And now what I want to do is I need a key to do the same thing. So on, control panel button pressed, something down here. So public void on control button pressed event. And what we want is to toggle control panel, this thing here, same as we do here. There is no key, but we're going to do that here. And we want to comment this out because there is no key for now. We're going to come back and put it back in later. But for now, we're going to comment it out. Now, what is calling this thing? Because, input.getKeyDown, this control panel controller, where is this live? Well, I called it control panel for a reason. Remember, last time there's a control panel itself, which is right here. And the control panel, which is right here, has the script on it. Here's the control panel controller. What I need is a button to put the control panel controller in play. And it's going to come out right here. Remember where it comes? It comes like right in here. So it's got to be someplace where if I press the button, and it's got to be within this screen space. Let's see what happens now when I press the button. Also, is this the correct location, right? It may not be, because if I scroll down for a second, you can see that that's clearly outside of the safe area, right? So we need to move it at least to the right, to there, at least to there, right? That's where it's going to appear when it comes in, which means I can't have my button occluded, right? If I press the button and it comes down, right, and this button comes into play. So again, if you notice, there is a pause button that comes in. Then it's just a pause button that comes in and out, right? But the control panel controller, it's got to come down where I have some kind of info button or something else that, that goes away. And it's got to be someplace that is mid-screen, like someplace up here, right? Again, far up where it's not going to be hit by this, and lower down so it's not going to be there. Let's undo that change. So Control. Actually, let's redo that change. Redo. We want to mark this position, right? Because this position is probably about right, and it should be aligned with the health bar, right? So health bar screen space, and my control panel looks like it's 397. Let's make it so it's something like 400. That's where it's going to be on the x-axis. Okay, so 400 and negative 316 on the y is probably right. So maybe make it negative 320. So 400 and 320. Okay, let's undo those changes. Right? So 400 and negative 320. So like there, 400 negative 320. So how does this work? Let's take a look at the control panel controller. 400 and negative 320, right? Remember, what we have is a lerp function to make this all happen, right? So in my control panel controller, I made it flexible, right, already. So here's the off-screen position, right? And here's the on-screen position. So negative 320 is here, and 320 on the Y. And then this is 400, and this is 400. So those are going to be fixed up. So now we can put it back where it is. We can put this at 400. So instead of 250, let's make this at 400. And 320, so way up there, and it's going to scroll in and come out. All right, just to make it the same, we can also modify the speed and blah, blah, blah. Awesome. So that is fixed up that thing. But we also need to know that where the other button is going to be. Let's make a button that looks like one of these. So I'm just going to grab the B button. This might be in the right position, but maybe a little higher. And let's make a copy of it. Control D. And let's move it to the left, way over here. And let's bring this thing in as well, just to see what that looks like. So we're going to bring this into where it's supposed to be, which is at 320. Okay, and let's bring this button a little bit higher so it's still inside the screen, but way up here, something like that. And let's also bring it to the left a little bit so it's aligned, so it's kind of like it's up here somewhere. And it can't be this color. It's got to be a weird, like, white color. So let's make this white again. And this will be white, but 200 everything. So here, and this will go back to 200 like we had before. Okay, that's that white color. And let's just rename this I for info. Because we don't have it. We could also use a symbol or whatever you want. But it can't be occluding this part here, right? Because that's where it's coming down. Theoretically, we shouldn't have the little menu thing come up here on the left. We might want to have it come in from the top, as an example. So we can modify that in a second. In fact, I think that's what I might do, because this doesn't make any sense, right? So let's first make it work, and then we'll modify it. So we'll make this the I button for info, right? And we'll rename this thing. So instead of map button, we'll call this control panel button. Control panel button. And what we want is for the text to be the control panel controller. So the control panel controller, which is here, we're going to drag and drop that into here. And now we can say that it's the control panel controller on control button pressed, which is going to activate the button, just like before. Except that this button here can't start at 400 and 320 because it's going to include this button here. In fact, maybe what we want is for this to be in the center of the screen somewhere. And instead of being the top left corner, we're going to make it based on the center or the top of the screen. So we're going to say that this is based on the top of the screen, right? And we're going to make this kind of at the 0 point of the screen. And it's going to be down to 320. Something like that, where it comes, it's going to be show pause here in the middle of the screen, and it's going to rise up again. So 0 and negative 320, this is 0 on the x-axis, 320, and that's going to pop back up there, and then we can move the button so that it is like way on the top here, like something that is like, you know, an info button that you have to kind of reach for because you don't want to accidentally get to it, right? Okay, so again, you can think about your interface a little bit differently later, but something like this might be working okay. All right, let's take a look at the button positions to make sure it's not some weird number. So negative 2766, why? Because it's based on this. It should be the top left corner. So again, we're going to move this, the reference, the anchor, to the top left corner of the screen. All right. So everything has its anchor. So for example, this button is anchored to the right. This button is anchored to the right. This is anchored to the right. This is anchored to the left. This is anchored to the top left. This thing here is anchored to the top, and we're going to move this off screen. So it's right now it's off screen at 320. 320. There we go. Off screen, and then it's going to come right into screen and out of screen. Okay, so that's how it's going to look. And then this button right here is 274 and 223. It's kind of offset from the health bar, and we may want to consider making it right on the top left corner of the screen. So let's do that. So let's move the health bar over a little bit. So we're going to grab the health bar and move it over. Again, just design, right? We want to think about where this is going to go. And I want to move this like right to the corner. So it's like right in the corner of the screen somewhere at some good number. And what is the health bar at? We want to make it balanced with the health bar. So first of all, let's see what this thing is. So this thing is looking like 274 and minus 120. Let's make it 275. That looks pretty good. And this is minus 120. What about the health bar? So the health bar here is, when I click on the health bar, is at, health bar is at, where is it centered? Ooh, it's going to be centered on the top left corner of the screen too, because I moved it. So that's definitely something that could have been fixed. So this is minus 100. Let's make it also minus 120. So it kind of looks like it is reasonable. All right. So kind of on the left. And we'll move that a little closer. And maybe at 575 or 580. Yeah, something like that. Okay, cool. So we got my button on the left, way on the top of the screen. And we've got this other stuff here. Let's see if this all works if I press it. So press play. And if I press my button, now it slides in and it comes back out, right? And I am locked. Why am I locked? Because my controller does that. Toggle button, on screen, player camera, pausable. I changed my cursor, don't I? Where do I change my cursor? Here it is, cursor lock. We don't want the cursor lock to be on. This should only work when I'm in desktop mode, right? Okay, let's try that again because cursor lock is terrible for mobile. Let's try that again. So bring it in, bring it out, bring it in, and pause the button. Okay, now pausable has a null reference exception. It says that what it's doing is it's saying that let's get a collection of mono behavior scripts and make them so that the game is paused. I'm not going to fix this here today because this is another issue, but the idea is that a menu comes down with some kind of screen, okay? So that's definitely something that we need to fix in the future, but the little panel will come down, right? All right, great. Let's save this and save project and build and run. And let's see how this looks on mobile. And one day when it feels like doing it, it's going to do its thing. All right, and bring down this thing, comes back down. It's pretty small for mobile. What we may want to do is make this a bigger panel for mobile. The button is pretty small. Think about my fingers. This is pretty small for mobile, guys. Like really small, right? Health bar is also pretty small. I may want to make this like way bigger than what it looks like right here, okay? But we can see how this goes up and down. We can jump. I can put the mini map on. Mini map's not bad, right? And what I can do is I can look around for mobile and I can move forward wherever I'm looking. So let's go left. Oops. There we go. Sorry, it's kind of hard to control because I am not on a mobile device, right? I'm on an emulator, right? So look pretty good. And what about if I get hit? What does that look like? All right, pretty good. It fall off, and that's how it should be. And we're good to go. All right. We've got a build that works. We need some tweaking. We definitely want to try it on a mobile device, and that's the next step, right? It's one thing to work in an emulator. It's another thing to work on an actual device, right? But we've got the main buttons. We've got some kind of button that we can use. And again, I recommend making it look more like a gamepad if we're doing something like this, right? Again, what we want to have is the same affordances. That's what it's called. That's from real life, where we have a gamepad with some regular controls. We want to take these same kind of controls and map them one-to-one as much as possible on a device, right? We want to try this on a device. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the person who's using your game or who's playing your game is going to have to learn how to control your game again, right? And that's not what we want. We want the same kind of controls that they're used to using on a gamepad to be used for your game. Again, some issues definitely with this. This is way too small from a panel perspective now, right? So where it worked before, and maybe it was the right size before, it's not the right size now. So what we want to try and do just to fix it, I recommend is we make it much bigger, something like undo. Let's scale it up. Let's make it so it's twice as big, period. And that's pretty easy to do when we scale this thing up. And we definitely want to move this into that position that's like 320. That is the 320 position. Let me try this out now and see how that looks from a scale perspective, right? So, right? That looks much better. And the button is actually a reasonable size, right? Doesn't work, but that's a different issue. We'll make the button work another day. All right, so great. Let's save this. So file, save project. Okay, so what do you need for lab 8? 4 screenshots. I want you to show me that it works on LDPlayer, okay? Not in your editor. Editor is not good enough for today. I need you to push yourself to make it work on LDPlayer. If you can make it on LDPlayer, that means you've done a lot of work, because to make it work on LDPlayer takes a bit of effort, right? To follow the way to do that. You want to definitely export, because this next whole part, this whole next half of semester is all going to be on LDPlayer. So it's way easier to make a small little project like this work on LDPlayer than your whole game work on LDPlayer. Okay, so please do it here. All right, and this will be your emulator. But remember, what you really want to do is, you want to have a mobile device to play with. And I don't have one that's handy right now. I'm looking around my office here. I thought I had a little mobile device that I was playing around with. I don't seem to have it handy, but I'm gonna find a little mobile device that I can use. It's just gonna be a little Samsung S10 or something like that, or an S7. And then that little mobile device, I'm just trying to see if I can see it somewhere. I don't see it. That little mobile device is something that you want to test with. Why do you want to test on your actual device? Because it's one thing to test with an emulator, and it's a whole other thing to test on a device, because the device will give you true fidelity of what it's going to look like. You can't do multi-touch right now, right, with a mouse. Mouse and multi-touch just don't work, right? How are you going to do, like, to play the game, jump with your right hand, meanwhile push your mouse on the left hand? There's going to be a delay. And playing the game, that's why I got you guys to make the WebGL game in the first place, because making the WebGL game and trying it out in, as an example here is really hard to do, right, on mobile. That's why I got you to make the WebGL side first. All right. Any questions around what I want for Lab 8? Lab 8, everything in LDPlayer, try it out. I want the controls working, and I want you to deploy something that looks like this on LDPlayer, okay? And that's what's due Saturday. I will go over it again on Friday during the live session. So if you want help on Friday, I'm going to be available during the live synchronous session that I can go through it and help everybody out on Friday afternoon between 1:30 and 4:30. Otherwise, that's it for me, guys. I'm going to stop recording now, and then I'll see you guys next week. Good luck on your lab. And good luck tonight for your submission, because it's member submission for your assignment 1 part 3 is due tonight at midnight. Okay, good luck, and I'll see you later.